And so just experiencing Copenhagen, I arrived and the first thing I did was I tried to get onto a bicycle. That was just something I'd wanted to do. It's to like people who aren't up to date with European urbanist bike centric stuff, like the gold standard is Amsterdam, basically. It is like human and cyclist centric. Cars are like pushed to the side and just kind of dealt with on a case by case basis. Parking is rare. Cars are guests on streets.
Yeah.
Copenhagen, however, still has cars, basically. And so there's a good video about like not just bikes where he just talks about Copenhagen, gives his read of it and stuff. But what he kind of says is that like cities really like to look to Copenhagen because it feels realistic. It feels like there's space for everyone. The way the roads kind of work is there's 3 tiers to it. Like the lowest tier in the center is the cars, and there's a 4-inch curb up, and you have like a paved asphalt bike lane. It's very wide and generous. And then there's another 4-inch curb or so up. And then you have little like cute European cobblestone pavers. But on those cute pavers, they'll have really long stretches of stone, like long planks of stone, kind of in a track formation. So if you're on a wheelchair, you're fine.
Yeah.
Like you're a little less free than I think you'd be in America because you kind of have to stay on this track system around on the sidewalks, and you can't really go on the super cobbly parts. But I noticed people in wheelchairs, people moving like carts of stuff, like making deliveries for restaurants, like they'd use these long stretches of flat stone. And so, yeah, it's a very like kind of demarcated form of moving people around. And it reminds me of in America, when we were first thinking about like cycling infrastructure in the 70s, there was this guy who developed this idea of vehicular cycling, is where he hated bike infrastructure because he thought that it would funnel us into these little tunnels that only cyclists could stay in, and it would create this system where bikes should only be in bike lanes. And if we're outside of it, then we'll be punished, ticketed, something like that, or threatened.
Yeah.
And I felt that a little bit kind of in Copenhagen. So the way like you make a left turn in Copenhagen is you just go through the intersection, you kind of stop on the opposite corner, and then you turn your bike left, and then you go. It's called a box turn. Every so often I'd see a cyclist hop from the bike lane into the car's left turn lane to use that. And cars do not like that. They will sometimes honk at you. And so I was like, oh yeah, it's clearly defined. And I think in America we say like, oh, ticketing, jaywalking and all that stuff is like anti-urbanist, anti-pedestrian behavior. And in Copenhagen, they have a different approach. Like they're very pro-pedestrian. They have the longest pedestrian street in Europe. It's called Stroget. But the fine for jaywalking is swiftly enforced, and it's like $250 American, I want to say. So I did not. Yeah, I did not try and test that at all. The fine for biking drunk is like $450, I want to say. And so I did not try that at all either. Too. Yeah, that, and I'm just very afraid of injuring myself in a foreign country. But yeah, so I started biking around, and it is really nice. You can just like continuously go everywhere. Like you just feel very safe, and there's just so many cyclists. And it's the style of cycling that I like, which is where everyone's wearing like casual clothes. Or actually, I mean, it's Europe, so nice clothes, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so different from like the American style of cycling commuter that you see, which is like a guy on a sporty bike in Lycra, and he's got all these lights and high visibility stuff strapped onto him, and he's got like weatherproof bags, and it's all very like technical and proper and all that. And then you just see people like in dresses or like just wearing khakis, or guys in suits. You'd see that a lot.
Yeah. Because people have the idea, this is something Alexi once mentioned on Infant Alumni, that like trad clothing, traditional clothing, it's restrictive and it's not good for labor. And then like you look at pictures of people in factories from 100 years ago, they're wearing button-ups, they're wearing dresses. You know, it's like, it's not as difficult to move in them as people think.
No, I've started wearing a chore jacket sometimes at work. But like those are some that came from kind of like a tailoring tradition. Like they would actually have like lapels and stuff. Like if you look at it, it is kind of like a suit jacket in that way. And it's like, no, but it's good for labor. Like there's a lot you can do with it. Yeah, and like wearing more classically cut or straight cut pants, like very easy to cycle in. I don't really know how people bike in skinny jeans, but I saw a lot of it. I guess the answer is spandex.
Yeah.
But I guess I can segue into just the general like people watching and I don't know, trying to observe Denmark from an outsider. The nice thing is that I do, as I suspected, I do really blend in to Denmark, and everyone just fully assumed I was Danish and would just start talking to me in Danish at any moment. It started on the plane, where they would go down the aisle and like ask you tea or coffee, and they get to me and they go tea eller kaffe, And I was like, oh wow, thank you. Like you're thinking